not going to make Baldur's Gate 4, which everybody's expecting us to do. We're going to move on. We're going to move away from D&D.
Says Larian announcing that they're not going to do Baldur's Gate 4, which is interesting, right? Because so Wizards of the Coast owns the IP. They own Baldur's Gate, right? So any deal that they had with Larian to make Baldur's Gate 3, Larian had to split some of the money with them. I don't know intimately the details of that, if it was a publisher or licensing deal, but there's some money that Larian is losing because of Baldur's Gate 3 IP. And I think you can look at it and go, am I playing the game because it's in Baldur's Gate, or am I playing the game because Larian created this great RPG? Right? So this is a little bit of a problem, right? So at one point, Wizards of the Coast was throwing money all around the industry. They were trying to get a bunch of games made with outside developers, and I think they bought a couple of developers, but they didn't have an amazing track record of the releases, right? This is something, I don't want to speak bad of developers, but they released things that were in a state that if you had money, you wouldn't release. And so when you're doing that, and then all of a sudden you cut back, right? There's a publicly announced, trying to walk carefully here. There's a public announced thing where they cut back on a lot of outside projects. They closed them all down. Larian survived through that because they had already had Baldur's Gate 3 out going on. And now Wizards of the Coast isn't evil for shutting those things down. They were in a financial problem. They had a bunch of underperforming stuff, like whatever. Okay, they're in a financial crunch. And so they did that to all their other IPs, but they let Larian continue on with Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 got released. Now, that means Larian did all this work in that backdrop of rough games being released as well as other games being cut. And they were still able to create a great game. So were they doing that in spite of Wizards of the Coast, or were they doing that because of Wizards of the Coast, right? Like, it's hard to tell, right? Again, very nice people at Wizards of the Coast, really like those people. But this is this weird problem of, is this a case where Baldur's Gate 3's success will kill the IP? Meaning, while Wizards of the Coast has some internal teams, nobody has the magic sauce of making these kind of games. I don't know a developer in the world who's qualified to make what Larian made, as well as I don't know a developer in the world who would want to sign up for that. That is a lot of weight to make a sequel to a hit game like that if you have not had years of making games like this, right? Like Larian has just made years and years of games like this, right? This is not a new game for them. And so if you're another developer, I mean, take the money, but man, that is a real hit. But then as fans, as players, you're like, oh, where's Baldur's Gate 4? When's this coming, right? And are we sophisticated enough to know when Larian releases something that isn't D&D? I was fine, D&D. D&D is, so I grew up with D&D as a kid thinking it was generic, it was just a thing. And then it's weird that it's an IP, so like, would people really care, or they just care Dungeons and Kobolds trademarked? I don't know. But you know, it's an interesting problem, because for both sides of, how does Larian then let signal to players, hey, this is Baldur's Gate 4, but it's not, because we made something new, and they keep exploring new things. And then what does Wizards of the Coast do with the Baldur's Gate 3? And then how do fans interact and navigate through this? And are they sophisticated enough to know what happened and why it's okay that they're playing this new thing? I don't know. It's interesting. I can't think of a time that somebody has announced and probably killed an IP this big and this successful in this way. Larian is a really interesting company, and I really respect a lot of their choices and what they're doing. Really smart about how they approach things. And so I look at this as going, they're being smart about this. So there you go.